And I'm joined now by the founder of Worldwide Extracts, Anthony Derkach. Anthony, welcome back.
Thank you. It's a world-class extract.
World-class. See, you'd think I'd know being a shareholder, duh. But I actually haven't even really been watching. How's it been going since it went public?
We've seen a pretty good churn, I think, on the stock. You know, the range is pretty much where our last financing was.
So all those deadbeat weak-ass sisters are getting out and licking their wounds and getting out of here.
You know, you have to shake the weak hands out to be successful in the long run. So
That's right. That's right. Okay, so let's, since this is essentially officially the first time for World-Class Extracts, what is the business model?
Business model is focused solely on industrial scale extraction of hemp and cannabis.
Okay.
Specifically, the target is going to be hemp in the United States.
Oh.
And so the whole theory has been that because this is an agriculture commodity, and since they have legalized it in the U.S. in December, you have a federal mandate. So you don't have any of the issues. You know, the cannabis industry in America is going to be amazing and booming, but right now, federally, it's illegal. So even though it's legal in the state or in municipalities, there are all sorts of challenges. You don't have a banking system that you can rely on currently in the states, but hemp is totally legal. Now what's going to happen is you're going to have a bunch of farmers that this year are going to begin to probably grow hemp instead of other
canola. At
canola,
$45 an acre versus hemp at $2.5 million an acre.
Yeah, or corn or whatever isn't working for them. Those commodities, of course, they tend to look at it changing. And so hemp has, there's this buzzword around hemp and specifically CBD. Mm-hmm. So what happens if you have your average farmer that has 100 or 200 acres of hemp growing? That is a astronomical amount of plant produce that we have never seen before, because the industries have been typically black market or very segregated or specific, that where a state would allow some, but it wasn't federally legal. Now that it's federally legal, you're going to have a lot of farmers or farming going into the hemp industry. Now what are you going to do with all of that hemp? Mm-hmm. Current extraction technologies that are used in the cannabis industry today weren't meant to handle tons of output per day, period.
Right. Okay, so do you have machinery and extraction gear all set up for this already? Is that what's under construction right now, or what point will you be ready to process hemp?
Sure. So we had built 2 alpha systems, to test out this theory on a smaller scale. Our first large scale system we expect to go into North Carolina in May, and that'll be the first of 3 that are going to be sort of month to month. The second will also probably go into North Carolina. The third, we're looking for the home. Currently, it's a deal that we have in the works, but we haven't figured it out. And there will be a 4th in the summertime that'll be in Canada. Okay,
and so is the model that you're going to toll process hemp on behalf of farmers, give them back an extract, or are you going to buy hemp and process it and create your own products in partnership with somebody?
It'll be a combination of both.
Okay.
Because you don't have a guarantee that, hey, that business plan is going to work perfectly. Yeah. And the tolling, there are going to be certain farmers, certain situations where they don't have the end user or the end buyer. So what good is a bunch of CBD oil going to do for them?
Right.
That will probably open up a bunch of opportunities. But nonetheless, tolling royalty is a great business. You see it in Valens and Meta Farms today that are using those systems, and you're looking at excellent stock charts, and their revenues are ramping up dramatically, and that's a great business model.
Cool. So then the idea of taking all this hemp and processing it and using whatever sort of works to get it out, what kind of size of market are we talking about in the whole United States?
Sure. So nobody knows the market for sure. What we do know is that because hemp, the CBD derived by hemp will have no psychoactive properties, so you don't get high by taking it. Really, what will end up happening is, that market though is with, I think most people today believe that there's some medicinal property to cannabis/hemp, and that CBD is one of those key molecules, which it is. For sure, and that there's a movement for people that would want to supplement with that as a health supplement, but they don't want to get high. And so that market ultimately is probably multiples of times bigger than the market that wants the psychoactive effect.
Sure. thematic today is this Economist article suggesting that China currently produces half of the world's legal hemp, which to me was a revelation because I was like, China? Because, you know, if somebody called me up and said, hey, I hear China's about to start issuing licenses, well, guess where every promoter in the continental North America would be in 2 days? They'd be in China trying to get those licenses. But if it's already been legal there and they've been producing it to the point where they're actually the largest supplier of hemp in the world, single country supplier, you got to wonder, what is it that they're producing all that hemp for?
So I have a little bit of knowledge in terms of China, and we've been there's only a couple of states where it's legal, where they're looking at the use of CBD as the output. Otherwise, you know, hemp is great for producing materials and ropes and sort of in the pulp and paper industries. You know, it's got so many different uses, but not on the medicinal or narcotic basis. There, it's still strictly very, very illegal, but they are. From what one of my colleagues went and saw, said that, you know, they do have very large farms. It's not in looking at extracting, you know, for CBD. So eventually that's bound to come, like anything, and I think the world, but China hasn't awoken yet to, you know, to the legalization of hemp for that purpose or cannabis as of yet. Yeah. In a federal way, where the federal government is backing that.
Sure.
So there's still maybes and if, but if you went and planted a hemp and for the purpose of extracting CBD in China today, you know, you could get yourself into trouble.
Sure. What does the footprint of an extraction operation look like in North Carolina, for example?
So our footprint that will, you know, one of the interesting aspects of our technology is that we can process wet or dry plant. So it's which is unique in the extraction world for cannabis or hemp. The footprint is about the size. Really, it perfectly fits into two containers that you could put on a ship or two on 18-wheeler. So you can transport it. It was designed to be a mobile application. Mobile, in theory, sounds great. The reality is, because of licensing, at first it's going to be done probably in specific addresses that an extraction license is tied to.
Right.
It's still a few years away, I think, for the mobile aspect to be able to take effect, where you could actually drive up to a farm and then literally start to take the hemp down and process it right away, where you don't have to dry it or cure it.
Sure. So do you have relationships with farmers growing hemp in North Carolina now who are going
to? We do, yeah. So,
okay.
So the first news release that was put out is regarding that first relationship, which we believe will be the first of many.
Oh, cool. Where is the most hemp produced right now in the U.S. that is
Kentucky.
Kentucky?
Yeah, Kentucky.
Okay, and is Kentucky a market that allows for extraction and production of CBD?
It does now because it's federally legal. So there's a lot moving. You're going to see other states that are going to get, you know, very active. State of California for sure will be very active. But, you know, one thing that, and I would say which you want to keep in mind when you're looking at it, a farmer that was growing corn this year and is going to grow hemp next year, there's a lot of factors. Number one, if they're not using the right hemp strain, because your CBD percentage is going to be absolutely critical.
Right.
And if you don't have the right percentage to begin with, you can extract as much as you want. It's going to be at risk for being economic, and so you don't want that to happen. Yeah. The other thing you don't want to have happen is, because it's an amazing plant. Hemp and cannabis are you know, just in general, these fascinating plants. You can have a farmer that sprayed a crop with a legal pesticide a decade ago, and it was totally legal, and now of course they found something that was, you know, wrong in that pesticide, and so today it's illegal. If the plant draws that chemical out of the soil from 10 years ago, you could have a failed crop. So there are a lot of risks, and so I would caution to say that, you know, our plan is also to work directly with the farmers to make sure that, number one, they have the right strains that are going to give them the best chance of success, and number two, to make sure that, you know, their environments are analyzed properly before they or us waste our time.
Right. I got to think that the farmers in North Carolina who are now growing corn and soybeans and canola are looking at what you're doing there and getting very excited about the prospect of transforming the yield per acre into something so much higher value.
So North Carolina also was a very historically big tobacco state. So there are generations of farmers that were growing tobacco. Some of them have switched over, but there's a fairly large contingent already that's begun to grow hemp. But again, I think the key here is going to be making sure that your source of supply has the right has the right supply. Right?
Yeah,
and,
you
and
bet.
the second that you have it could look like a great hemp crop, but if the percentage of CBD is not high enough, you're going to have efficiency issues.
Sure. And all this hemp is grown outdoors. It's not grown in greenhouses, correct?
So there are greenhouses that do grow hemp, but the majority of hemp is grown outdoors, and that's where you get these 1,000-acre farms and these 100 to 1,000-acre hectare farms.
Right. How soon do you think then until the excessive supply of CBD from hemp absolutely chokes the market and drives the price down to such a level where the farmers are thinking, okay, that was great, plant corn next spring? So is it like, have we got 1 year where it's like suddenly all these farmers are going to grow hemp, and next thing the price is going to go, CBD is going to go down below the cost of production because there's just so much of it?
That's a very, very good question. And I was having this discussion with an investment bank I won't name, and we were talking about how long do you think like today the oil market in Canada, for example, is extremely high. Is it sustainable at these price points? Probably not. The question is when will it start going down? It could start going down today. But it could start going down in 18 months or 24 months. And so the argument has been that there's still not enough infrastructure to make that type of a dent where people believe the demand in the market is going to come from. And the fact that we saw, I think it was CVS in the USA that announced that they were going to distribute CBD in 1,500 stores across America is like the tip of the iceberg. So the demand for CBD is generally, which is not going to be psychoactive, is expected to grow dramatically. So the question is, when will that balance ever happen? Is if I knew that crystal ball, I would probably be on a giant world's biggest yacht right now, not in this interview. So.
Right. Okay, well that's interesting. Now I wonder if so there's no denying that at some point we're going to have an excess of supply. Fine. But the guest after guest who comes on my platform says, yeah, but that's fine because the value and the margin is in the value add products, the consumer packaged goods that have hemp derived CBD as an ingredient.
100%.
And in that realm, it's not so much the cost of the input commodity is not really the key factor. It's competition on a different level for mind share and market share based on marketing and market penetration. So my question for you is, how much of that figures into world-class extract strategy versus how much of it is you just want to be strictly an industrial business-to-business provider, and how much are you gearing up for a consumer packaged goods war on the next level?
So it's a great question. One aspect that you brought up, which is interesting, cost is always going to play a role, right? So anyone that tells you the cost is not, that's not true. Coca-Cola makes Coke. Their cost of sugar is a very, very important aspect of their business and their product. So cost is going to be king in the end, and having that sort of cost-quality relationship is what every single manufacturer of every good is going to look for. The value add chain for sure is where the margins ultimately will end up, because as we all know, farmers don't make all of the money. It's the Heinz brands that sell the ketchup. The tomato farmer doesn't really make the money, but the Heinz brand does, because they sell the ketchup and they have the distribution. So ultimately, it will go into that realm. I think we're unique in the sense that it's going to be a high margin business no matter what here for the foreseeable future. But after that, the question is, if we can develop distribution relationships and or own them, then you're going, I guess, theoretically, not from seed to sale if you're buying the seed. Right.
All right. Well, that's great. I'm a shareholder, so I'm looking forward to the story developing.
Thank you.
We'll have you back soon for an update. Thanks very much for joining me, Anthony.
Thank you.